I know quite a few of our economists.
So the BBT program's here in the business?
Yes, in college management. Yeah. It's not.
Hey Phil. How's it going?
Sit next to me.
Yes, sit down. Right there.
No, he's not, I think. But it's a good pick for this lecture series we have between economists and political scientists. And I do political science. Although we don't use political science, our academics we use practitioners before. And even one of our political scientists was more of a humanist. The good thing about Isaac Garlis in his book is it does have so he makes yeah. Sure.
Here, actually, do you mind? Thanks so much for coming. Who's says nice? Brown and cat.
I mean, this
honestly, laugh very hard. That's one of your finer moments.
Yeah. Which I think.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's fine.
I work with the student sponsoring this. Society for Technology. So,
no, you did. You did. No. Hey, Andy. How's it going? Do you have your piercing collection ready? Huh? Not yet? You'll work on it though, right?
I'm a political scientist. Straight down here.
Excuse me.
So it's university time. It's a few minutes away. College students.
Okay, we're going to get started in a moment. As usual.
Whenever you're ready, it's your show.
That's I'm still going.
Does this work? All right. We're going to get started here. Welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Josh Wyndham. I'm a member of SPEL, the Society for Politics, Economics, and the Law. SPEL is tonight's sponsor. So they put this together, and that's why we're all here. Tonight's debate title is Laissez-Faire Capitalism versus Mixed Economy, which system is best? We're going to start with just a few brief introductions. First, Dr. Yaron Brook, to the far left, is the Executive Director of the Ayn Rand Institute. He has a PhD in finance. He'll be arguing in favor of laissez-faire capitalism. Dr. Brook's a columnist at Forbes. His articles have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Investors Business Daily, and many other publications. He's a frequent guest on national radio and television programs, and is the co-author with ARI fellow Don Watkins of national bestseller Free Market Revolution, How Ayn Rand's Ideas Can End Big Government. The book's on sale to the right, probably I think $10 per student. To the far right, Dr. Carl Smith. Thanks for being here, Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith is arguing in favor of a mixed economy. He joined the School of Government at Carolina Chapel Hill in 2007. Prior to that, he was a graduate fellow at the Institute for Emerging Issues, where his work was focused on state and local tax reform. Dr. Smith holds a BA and a PhD in economics from NCSU, and he writes and consults primarily on issues of tax reform, structural deficit reduction, and long-term public spending trends. Dr. Smith is also the developer of several interactive tax forecasting tools used by the North Carolina General Assembly and North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. Finally, in the middle, our moderator, Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a professor of political science in the School of Public and International Affairs at NC State. He received his PhD from the University of Connecticut and teaches courses in American politics, including Introduction to American Government, the Presidency and Congress, which I've taken, the legislative process, the public choice and political institutions. In 1999, he won College of Humanities and Social Sciences Poole Outstanding Teacher Award. He received NCSU's Outstanding Extension Service Award in 1999, 2000, 2003, and 2004. Before we finally start, I'd like to ask you to raise your hand if you, A, support laissez-faire, this laissez-faire system in general. I'm going to go through the options. A, laissez-faire, B, semi-mixed economy, and C is haven't decided or don't know. So A, raise your hand. Okay, so a good number of free market proponents here in this room. Hands for B. All right, that's relatively equal. And then C, no idea. All right, good fortune, no ideas. All right, we're going to let Dr. Taylor kick us off here with the debate format. Thanks, Dr. Taylor.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Before we start, let me just talk very briefly about the format of tonight's debate. We will begin with opening statements from both of the participants, and I think I remember that Dr. Brooke was going to go first with those. After those 7-minute opening statements, I will ask 3 questions of both Dr. Brooke and Dr. Smith, and they don't know the questions, by the way, although they probably have some idea. I don't even know them totally yet, because it depends on what they say in their opening statements. But just to let you know that these are blind to them. They'll have 3 questions from me, and each response will be a maximum of 4 minutes, with a maximum of 2-minute rebuttal for each of them. That will get us to, we think, somewhere around about 50 minutes, and then hopefully we can sort of rid ourselves of some of these rigid rules and just have a sort of free-for-all Q&A session with you as well. So, to get us started, we'll have the opening statements, and for 7 minutes, Dr. Brooke, why don't we start with you?
Stopwatch.
Yeah, I've got the stopwatch as well, and I have high-tech things to let them know when time is left.
Okay, so I'm obviously here to defend the proposition that capitalism is superior to a mixed economy. I would argue capitalism is superior to any other political social system. But let me start, because there's always a lot of confusion about this. Let me start by defining or describing what I mean by capitalism, because capitalism is a term thrown around all the time. What I mean by capitalism is laissez-faire capitalism. It is the system of private property. It is the system in which all property is privately held. And I don't just mean symbolically privately held. That is, you've got a little diploma that says that you own the property. But I mean that you have use of that property, the full meaning of property. You can dispose of it, you can use it as you see fit, not as your neighbors see fit or as some government regulator sees fit. So I'm for a system of government, capitalism, which is free of state regulation, free of government control. It is laissez-faire. Leave it alone. Leave us alone. Hands off. A complete, if you will, separation of state from economics. The state has no role in economic life, in our economic life. That's what I mean by capitalism. So when capitalism is blamed for the financial crisis, it can't be so, because capitalism didn't exist in 2007. There was no capitalism. We can argue about what caused the financial crisis, but it wasn't laissez-faire capitalism. So now the question is, does this system work? And I want to answer 2 aspects of this. One, Does capitalism produce the goods? Is it efficient? Does it work from a purely economic perspective? And then to me, the more important question of, is capitalism good? Is it right? Is it moral? Is it just? Which to me is the much more important question at the end of the day. And I'll try to do all this in the 5 minutes or whatever remaining. On the question of does it work, to the extent that it is tried, and granted, capitalism in the pure form has never really been tried, but to the extent that it's been tried, to the extent that a country or society has gotten close to a situation where property is private, where businesses and individuals are left alone, it thrives. Not only is it a success, it is an amazing success. It is what has allowed all of us to rise out of poverty. If you think 250 years ago, we were all poor. 99% of the people were poor. It has allowed the creation of all the kind of the material wealth at the base, at the foundation. That is this system that is driving that. Countries that tilt more towards capitalism, again, the pure form is not being tried, tend to be more successful than countries that have a mixture that tilts away from capitalism. So capitalism is a system that produces the goods. It creates wealth. It helps us all rise up from, as I said, I think the poor are the greatest beneficiaries of capitalism. Of anybody, the poor benefit more than anybody else. It's not only that we can look at history and we can look kind of cross-sectional at a variety of different countries and see the success of markets when they're allowed to work. But I also think that from an economic perspective, we understand the theory of why they work. And I'm not going to articulate the theory now, but markets, we understand why markets work. What is it about incentives? What is it about human behavior? What is it about the way information is transported? What is it about prices? What is it about all these things that make it possible for markets to deliver the goods? This has been well understood, I think well understood for a long time, at least since the days of Adam Smith. In my view, the primary objection to capitalism that drives whatever economic objections come up, the primary objection to capitalism is always a moral objection. It is always an objection rooted in morality or justice or fairness and so on. And so let me make my second to last point. I believe capitalism is moral. I believe it's just. I think it's the only economic system that is moral and just. Why? Because it is the only system that allows people to pursue their own lives, to pursue their own values, to pursue their own happiness freely. It leaves them alone to do so. It is the only system that extracts from human relationships force, coercion, the enemy of freedom, the enemy of happiness, the enemy of human reason, the enemy of our ability to pursue values. So capitalism is a system that says, no coercion, we're leaving you alone. And let me be clear, government has a role in capitalism. That role is to protect property rights and protect us from bad guys, from crooks, from frauds, from Bernie Madoffs. Other than that, it is a system of voluntary exchange. It is a system where people voluntarily choose to associate or not associate, trade or not trade, exchange or not exchange, give charity or not give charity. It is a system where people voluntarily pursue their own life, their own happiness, their own success. And therefore, as such, since my standard of morality, the standard for me for morality, and this is again different than the conventional sense, moral to me means that which is consistent with human life, that which allows human life to flourish, that which allows individual human life to flourish. To me, the enemy of morality in this context is force. So this is a system that allows individual human life to flourish, to be successful, for people to pursue their values. It doesn't mean it guarantees anybody anything, right? It doesn't guarantee you happiness. It allows you the freedom to pursue that happiness. Let me just end on this. When we talk about a mixed economy, it's a mixture of what? And I think fundamentally, essentially, a mixed economy is a mixture of freedom and coercion. It's some property rights, some freedom, some do what you will to pursue your own values, and some, I'm going to tell you how to live, I'm going to tell you what to do, I'm going to tell you how much sugar to consume, I'm going to tell you what to do, what you can and cannot do with your property. So it's a mixture of freedom and coercion at the bottom, at its fundamental. I'm for freedom. I'm against coercion, and therefore I'm for a pure form of capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. He should be on radio because he came in exactly 7 minutes. Dr. Smith.
All right, so I am here to defend the mixed economy, and like capitalism, it's kind of hard to define. So I was going to let Dr. Brooks go first, and then basically build my defense off of that. I pretty much knew he was going to be to the right or to the more laissez-faire than whatever I want to support, so I could start there. But I want to lay a base of the things that we probably agreed on. We probably agree that in general, free markets are a productive way to produce goods and services. We probably agree in general that directing services from the government has a severe problem with knowledge, the accumulation of knowledge, and the usage of knowledge, most articulated by Hayek. We probably agree that a system of state control has problems producing the right incentives. And we probably agree, even though a person bring this up, that there are public choice problems involved with government directing production. The government has to have some way of deciding what it does, and that way can always be corrupted. Where we disagree, I think, is can we improve on something that's extremely laissez-faire? And so I didn't know exactly where he was going to land on what I sometimes think of as like a Nozick, Hayek, Mrs. Rothbard spectrum. I think we're somewhere in the Mrs. spectrum, maybe. Rand. Well, boy, yeah, so Rand, now I'm a little confused. So there's some issues, some of which I think you may accept, and so I won't spend too much time on that. But I think there are places where we can improve on this sort of completely laissez-faire system. The first issue that we have is enforcing the property rights themselves, and I think Dr. Brooks is going to give on that. And the problem there is that without some sort of government to enforce property rights, you naturally devolve into a feudalistic system. You naturally devolve into a system where the people who are in the business of enforcing the law gain all the rents from society. They take all the rents from society. So the knights or the samurai or whoever's in the business of enforcing the law takes all the rent. And so unless you have a democratic or otherwise sort of popularly owned government that enforces the law, you're going to default to some sort of feudalistic system. But I think you may give on that one. So then I'll move back to what I think are some other problems with that. One is a general issue of unwritable contracts. And so the notion that everyone can decide for themselves and live their life how they want is wonderful, and we think that free markets usually produce the most productive outcome. But there are some cases where individuals have trouble entering into the agreements that they want. And the most obvious case of that is children. And so children have a difficult time entering into long-term contracts, and one of the contracts that children might want to enter into is to borrow money to fund their education so that they'll be more productive later. But a child can't go, a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old can't go to the bank and take out a loan and say, I'm going to pay for preschool, and then I'm going to pay for elementary school, and then I'm going to pay for going on to high school. And so the child is at a fundamental disadvantage there in that he can't enter into a contract that would promote both the child's interest and the interest of the lender. And so there's a role for government to step in and say, well, we'll fund the child's education with the understanding that we'll get the money back later in taxes. And often felt sentiment is that, well, we could leave that to the parents, but you run into the problem that the interest of the parents and the interest of the child are not necessarily the same. So people often have children and are bad parents, and they don't care about their children, or they're neglectful of their children, and without some way to solve this fundamental contract problem, there's no way for the child to get out of that situation. There's no way for them to say, okay, my parent isn't willing to fund my education, so by gosh, I'm going to go and raise the capital to fund my own education. And so by providing for that, the state can improve that. We have the same issue in lots of cases of healthcare. People are born with congenital diseases that they can't insure against, so you can't write an insurance contract, you can't enter into a health insurance contract before you're born. And once you're born, you already have some disposition towards good health or dispositions towards bad health. That makes it difficult to write healthcare contracts. And so throughout history, writing healthcare contracts has always been problematic. Healthcare, for most of its early history, was funded by charitable organizations like the church. then later municipalities, and then later federal governments. But there's always been a difficulty establishing a fully fledged private market in health insurance, and even in the places that it is or was established, like in the United States, it was done with extreme government intervention. And that's largely because it's difficult for people to enter into contracts regarding their health when, as soon as they're born, they're either in a healthy status or an unhealthy status. It's very difficult to insure against it, or you're predisposed towards having certain diseases or predisposed towards not having certain diseases. So unwritable contracts and adverse selection into either being healthy or not healthy is a fundamental problem without having any sort of government intervention at all. Then we went into the problem of externalities, which I'm sure Dr. was ready to address. So we have pollution is the most common externality that we think of. So when people have a factory, they put smog into the air, they put other pollutants into the air, and it's very difficult for the market system to solve that problem. It's very difficult for all the people who are affected by pollution to somehow get together and negotiate with the factory owner to get rid of the pollution. And so there's a potential role for government to step in and say, here is, on the extreme case, here are some rules and regulations to reduce pollution, or perhaps even we can create an artificial market in pollution permits that can help us solve this problem. But that's government sort of adding on to the natural market. Pollution can be a very, very big deal. One of the major challenges facing humanity right now is climate change, which is pollution in carbon dioxide and methane. At the same time, sort of congestion is a similar sort of problem, and it's difficult to think of congestion and traffic congestion as being huge deals, but they are some of the fundamental limits to the growth of cities and the growth of increasing returns to scale and prosperity. And so the government funding of roads to reduce congestion, the government funding of sewers to reduce the congestion of human waste has been instrumental in the growth of cities and the expansion of the productive capacity that comes from cities. I see I don't have much time, so I'll try to be quick. There are then sort of more complex moral issues that I'm just going to touch on really briefly that you might have problems, which is that if you don't feel that Dr. Brooks's sort of theory of morality captures everything. And the two areas I'm going to touch on: self-congruency. So people have a fundamental issue that you as a 20-year-old and you as a 60-year-old are kind of the same person, but kind of not. And how willing you accept that, might depend on a long conversation about what it means to be a human and what it means to have self-congruency. But the fact is that Social Security and other programs which sort of induce people to save are very popular among the people who themselves are induced to save. And it's hard to explain that unless the 20-year-old and the 50-year-old are somehow slightly different people. I guess I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. I obviously look menacing. Thank you, Dr. Smith. So now we're going to get into a question and answers. I have 3 questions that I've just sort of scribbled down here and revised from ones I came in with for the participants. And we'll start with Dr. Smith. And answers to these questions are 4 minutes and each, and then we'll go with 2-minute follow-ups. I will start the first question with Dr. Smith, and then the second question with Dr. Brooke, and then the third question with Dr. Smith. My first question is, which one shall I ask? Why don't we do